Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here, welcome back to the railway and welcome to another review of an Oxford Rail locomotive. So as I say, another Oxford Rail loco to show you today. It's not a brand new release or anything like that. It came out 1 or 2 years ago now, around the same sort of time as the Dean Goods and the Adams radial tank. But at the time it came out, it sort of just passed me by a little bit because it's a diesel shunter. Obviously I'm a little bit more interested in steam than I am diesels. And also the Dean Goods and the Adams radial tank weren't all that amazing. So I thought, you know what, I'll give it a miss. But since Oxford announced and released their N7 locomotive, and since we saw how amazing it was, everything's changed, and it's sort of given me a bit of a hunger, let's say, for Oxford Rail locomotives. So I thought it's high time to pick one of these up and take a look and see what it's like. So here it is. It is this, the Janus Shunter. It is a diesel, as I say. I'll tell you all about it later on. These are relatively inexpensive. I can't remember how much I paid for this now, but it wasn't a lot at all. Yeah, I think they have an RRP of £99, £95 or something like that, so relatively inexpensive. Although you can get them from Hatton's for £80 and that sort of thing, and sometimes even a lot less than that. So there's a link in the description if you want to pick one up. They do them in all sorts of liveries, but as you can see, I've got the BP oil version of this in sort of a blue. Some people say it's green. I know Callum Wilcox thinks this is green, but I think it's blue, I think. But anyway, that doesn't much matter. We'll get this out and we'll take a look and see what it's like. Hopefully it will be quite impressive. So yes, very, very excited to be opening another Oxford Rail product. You might notice online, in fact, that these are listed as Golden Valley Hobbies products. That basically they're just the people that commissioned this model. They commissioned Oxford Rail to make these models. That's all that is. So yeah, as you could see through the window, you could see the loco there. Quite a small little thing, although I think they were quite beefy in real life. And before I open it up, if I show you the end of the box, you can see that this has the product code GV2014. Of course, GV stands for Golden Valley. This is the OR76 Jan 003. It is a Janus 060 diesel in BP, British Petroleum livery, and it does have an 8-pin NMRA compatible DCC socket as well. Apart from that though, there's not a lot to see on the box. As I say, no information on the back, although I'm sure that Oxford Rail would have provided us with some on the inside. So with that, for the first time, and I should say once again, this is the first time this has been out of the box. I've had it for a little while now, but I've never opened it. So with that, here we go. And there it is. It's quite an interesting livery, a bit sort of toothpastey perhaps, but you don't have to get a toothpastey one if you don't want. They do all sorts of different ones. In fact, yeah, I think this was the cheapest, so that's a little bit sort of tight of me really. But if you want to spend a little bit more, you can get some really quite attractive liveries on these. Not that this one isn't attractive though, I'm not going to say that, definitely not. Okay, so there we go, there's the blister pack. We'll get to that in just a second and look at it very thoroughly. But to start with, we have the Golden Valley Hobbies instruction manual here, or operation and maintenance manual. Let's have a very quick look inside here. And yeah, it's quite simple actually. It just shows you all of the usual stuff. It's quite similar to the Hornby ones really, isn't it? It shows you a little bit about where to oil, and look at the state of that. There's arrows absolutely everywhere showing you where to oil, but no, I suppose it does the job. And then of course all the usual stuff about removing the body and how to fit the DCC decoder. Quite like the look of that motor. It's quite a big motor in there, so maybe that is a good sign. We'll have to wait and see how this one runs. But for the first ever time, at least for me, let's get this out and see what it's like. And again, I don't think I've ever seen one of these in the flesh. I've only ever seen photos before. Okay, so we have some sort of small detail pack here. It looks like we have some chain link couplings here, or perhaps they're screw link. I can't actually see, they're very, very tiny. But yes, if you wanted to fit those, you very much could do. Okay, here we go then. Let's lift this out of its packaging and see. So let's open this. And there it is, and my gosh, it is a very odd livery, but quite attractive one. And wow, you know what? I'm getting the same feeling that I got when I first took the N7 out of the packaging, because the weight of this thing is just outstanding. It really is very, very heavy, and once again, just like with the N7, I've got that cold feeling against my fingers. So let's do the weird part where I put it to my lips, and yes, indeed, I can tell that the sort of lower portion of the body here, this running board, yeah, that is very much made of metal, made of die-cast metal, which is very much great to see. So yes, there it is. Very, very interesting looking shunter. I'll be taking a much closer look at some of the details on this in just a second, but first of all, here we go with a little bit of history on the Janus Shunters. So the Janus Shunters were built by the Yorkshire Engine Company, and they were mainly used in the British steel industry, but with some exceptions, and obviously this one as a BP locomotive wouldn't have been in the British steel industry. Now 102 of these were built in total between 1956 and 1965. Weighing in at 49 tonnes, they ran on 2 Rolls-Royce diesel engines, and they were capable of speeds of up to 23 miles an hour. The name Janus is also used to describe an ancient Roman god with 2 faces, and so it's easy to see how these shunters inherited that name due to their slightly symmetrical nature really, with the engine at each end. These days the majority of the Janus Shunters have been disposed of, but there are just over 20 still in existence, many of which are still in service, and in fact there are only 7 that are actually in preservation, so that sort of gives you an idea of just how many are still in active service. Okay, so there is a nice close-up look then at Oxford's Janus Shunter, and yes, I think it has to get full marks, doesn't it, for the unusual livery scale or something along those lines. It really is quite an unusual looking model. I have to say though that on first impression this model certainly doesn't have the same level of finesse that the N7 did. A lot of these observations are quite minor, but I think, you know, as a proper review this needs to address them really. So the first thing that I noticed really, and this happened from, you know, the first second when I first got it out of the packaging, I did notice that it just doesn't feel as sturdy in the hands, and I think a lot of that has to do with the handrails. And obviously you can see why they had this problem, because looking at the handrails, they are very, very large, they cover a large area and they do protrude a long way unsupported from the bodywork. However, when you touch them in any way, they flex in a very large way, as you can see. Just look at that. It's almost like they're rubber. They flex so much, and especially the ones on the front, just look at that. Now, I don't want to criticise that too much, because I wonder whether Oxford Rail made them rubbery on purpose, because obviously if they're nice and rubbery and they flex rather than break, then that is a massive advantage. But they're so rubbery that they don't always return back to the same position, and there's certainly 1 or 2 areas on this model where the handrails look a little bit wobbly, and in fact they did straight out of the pack. The other thing is that the body is slightly loose. Now it's only very slightly, but you can feel it moving when you touch it. As you can see there, you can see it's wobbling very slightly. Now I think it's supposed to be like that. I think that must just be due to the way that the body is attached, but once again, when you get it into your hands, you just think, oh hang on, is something loose on here? Obviously though, once it's down onto the track, that is not a problem. Also, the paintwork. Now, for the most part, the paintwork is done very, very well on this model, but there are a few minor niggles. For example, there is this yellow splodge on the other side there. You can see that. And again, that wasn't me. That did come like that straight out of the pack. And as you can see, the wasp stripes on the front there are a little bit fuzzy. They're not sort of very, very defined. There's a little bit of bleeding of the paint from the yellow stripe into the black there. Again, it's only noticeable when you look up close, but it's one of those small things that slightly spoils the illusion a little bit. On the positive side though, it is extremely heavy, as I've already said, and a lot of the detail does seem to be well applied. So let's take a look at some of that now then. Well, let's start and look at the paintwork. So you have got the British Petroleum logo there on the side of the cab there. Very, very much can't fault that. That looks very good. And you've also got glazed windows on this model, which are lined in the yellow paint, which is pretty cool. The grills on each end, obviously this is a twin engine locomotive, so there is a grill on both ends, but as you can see, they're very, very good. The effect of the grill on there is quite realistic. The other grills are a little bit on the simplistic side. As you can see, they are just purely moulded in, although it would have been very, very impressive if this had full 3D grills, given that the mechanism would have to be behind those grills. And also the coupling rods on this loco have also been painted into the red. Quite like the look of that. That always brings out the detail on a locomotive. And with that then, let's talk about some of the separately fitted details. There are, as I've mentioned, lots of separately fitted handrails, many of them quite wobbly, but the ones on top of the sort of engine housings, they're a little bit better. Obviously they don't protrude quite as far, so they're a little bit more sturdy. You do have buffers on these models which appear to be metal, but unfortunately those aren't sprung, so not a massive deal, but obviously the N7 had those, and the N7 really wasn't an awful lot more expensive than this. And on top of that, if we take a look around the back, you can see that this buffer here is very much on the wonk, which really, really isn't very good to see. And that, coupled with the paint splodge on the other side, suggests to me that these haven't been assembled all that carefully, let's say. On the separately fitted detail, one thing I really, really like is the caps on the top of the exhausts here. They are slightly open, as you can see, as if you know, the fumes are being blown out of them there. So that is really, really cool. That is a very good effect, and those are very sturdily applied, I must say. And on top of, well, one of the engine housings, you can see that there are 3 separately fitted metal pieces there. Not too sure what those are. I'm not a massive diesel expert, so if anybody knows what those are, do let me know. But they are good. They are made of die cast, which is great. perfect. And you've also got, just on the main plate here, you've got a tiny little gauge which has been painted onto there. Again, not absolutely sure what that is. It's probably showing some sort of pressure or level. Maybe it's, I don't know, it could be something to do with the fuel or something, couldn't it? Or maybe brake pressure or something along those lines. But anyway, it's quite a nicely painted little thing. And speaking of painted gauges and things, you can see inside the cab we do have some paintwork going on inside there. It is quite a realistic looking cab actually. I really do like that. And the cab is very well detailed in general. You can see we've also got windscreen wipers fitted onto the outside windows there, so that all looks very, very good. So yeah, in general, it's not a bad model. It's just not a very nice thing to have to lift up. There's almost no way you can grab onto it. Even if you grab under here, look, there's a flexible pipe underneath the cab which moves when you touch it. So you kind of feel like you're treading on eggshells a little bit when you lift this up, which is not a nice feeling to have with a locomotive. But however, I can't really fault the detail on this thing. In general, it's relatively well done, and I have to admit that despite a lot of the flimsiness of some of the details, regardless of the reason behind their flimsiness, I have to say none of them have actually broken off, which has to be a thumbs up. So there we go, that is a quick look at the detail. Not too bad in general, I would say, but let's get on to the all-important performance and see how this runs. I'll be very, very interested to see. So there it is then, the Oxford Janus down onto the track, and I hate to admit it, but I think this sort of toothpaste colour is starting to grow on me a little bit. I know for a fact that a lot of people will probably have quite a severe dislike for this, but to be honest with you, it's just so different to anything else in my collection that I can't really help but enjoy it a little bit. So yeah, I quite like it actually, but I apologise if it's not your thing. Okay, so performance then. There's not an awful lot to say on performance because obviously it doesn't have a tender and it doesn't have any non-driven wheels which might have springing issues or anything like that. However, looking at the underside of it, you can see that there are a proper set of bearings on the wheel set, and that has always been the case, I think, with the Oxford rail. And also every wheel, I should say, has got a pickup going to it as well, so it basically ticks all of the boxes. Whether or not the motor is any good, we will find out. But I think we're ready. Let's go with the first ever test. So we'll start off with a crawl, then we'll let her run in, and we'll see after the running in whether the crawl improves. So here we go, first ever run. Wow. Whoa. That started off very well. It's not really moving now. Hang on. Well, that's very disappointing. It seems to be improving a bit now. It started great. There we go. That's improved a little bit. Blimey. Let's zoom out a bit. Yeah, very, very groggy performance there to begin with. It does seem now to have improved very slightly. I thought I could hear some arcing going on inside. But I'm not absolutely sure. That reminds me a little bit of how my Dean Goods was to start with. Right, so perhaps it probably really does want a good run in. But just to test, sorry, that's thrown me a little bit. I wasn't expecting it to behave like that. That was super weird. But let's zoom back in again and try a slow speed just so that we've got it on camera. Blimey, it does throw the white balance off a bit on the camera. Right, here we go. So yeah, that's very, very, very good. If it will do that smoothly, which it seems to be doing now actually, I will be very, very impressed. So that is generally a good slow speed. Let's try it backwards, see if it does better in that direction. No, not really. It's just about as good. So yeah, not an impressive start really on performance. It didn't. I thought I was going to have to send it back, to be honest with you, but it seems to have improved now after its initial dodginess. It does seem to cut out a little bit though. Anyhow, let's give her a little bit of a run in then, and we'll see how she goes after that. Okay. Okay, so it seems to have stabilised quite nicely now, so assuming there isn't a fault with it, I think, touch wood, we're going to be okay. But it is very, very smooth. It's pretty quiet too. I think quieter than the N7, in fact. And yeah, generally speaking, It goes very, very well, doesn't it? That is rather fast, I would have thought. I mean, they're only supposed to go at about 23 miles an hour. But it's down to the driver, really, isn't it? If you want it to do a realistic speed, it's capable of doing that. Okay, so after a stressful start, I'm actually very impressed with the performance. So I'll see you in just a second after she's had a chance to run in. Okay, I'm back, and unfortunately I've had to retire Janus to the rolling road because unfortunately she wasn't making it around the track. In fact, every time she got to this express point here, she would just stop dead and I'd have to go and start her again. So to make sure she got a good run in, I've just popped her onto the rolling road. So yeah, that issue really shouldn't have been the case because as you can see there is quite a large wheelbase on this loco. So there isn't a point on the express points where every wheel is isolated from the track, which suggests to me that maybe one or multiple of the pickups aren't actually making very good contact with the wheels. Now luckily there's quite an easy fix for that. All you have to do is just access the pickups and then adjust them slightly. So I will do that if that hasn't improved things, although she has now been running in for quite a while, so it's possible that things will have improved. However, I'm not going to make any adjustments to it until after the review because I think it's only fair that I review her in the condition she arrived in. Yeah, just to say it's not the end of the world if that is a problem. So let's take her off and put her back onto the track and see if she makes the express points a little bit better this time. Okay, so let's try that slow speed crawl then and see if she'll do any better now having had a run in. And yes, I think that is a little bit better. Let's try it in the other direction. As you can see, that really is remarkably slow. Let's go in a bit closer on that. Yes, that is highly impressive, in fact. She is, in fact, moving. I know it's difficult to tell, but yes, she is actually moving at that speed. Let's try it in the other direction. Interestingly, I won't touch the speed, and yeah, she will do it in that direction. So, let's test whether the issue on the express points has improved or not. Speed it up a little bit, just to be fair. Ooh, I saw a little bit of a struggle. No, she hasn't managed it. I don't know why she's cut out there, because there's no dead spot there. Bit faster then, let's get her over there. There we are. Let's try back the other direction. So yeah, it's just not terribly... Yeah, let's just say there's a couple of continuity issues with the pickups. Yeah, there we are, she died again. Try that again. One more then, at that slow speed. But as I say, if that's the biggest problem you've got with the performance, then that's not something really to complain massively about. Yeah, as you can see. So yeah, I think a small adjustment on the pickups after the review would do her some good there. Anyway, I've got some goods ready for her to haul. I've got some tankers. There is a BP one at the front, but behind that it's just Shell wagons. So perhaps BP have done a deal with Shell today. Who knows? Anyway, let's get this coupled. Let's see how she pulls. Hopefully it will be quite an impressive performance. Speed up then. There we go. I must comment though on what a smooth and quiet runner it is. It might not be all that reliable in terms of power, but it certainly does run very smoothly, so I can't fault that. Okay, let's check that it's coupled properly, and it seems to have, more or less. Yep, there we go. And again, it does mess with the auto white balance on the camera, that toothpaste livery, but no, that's okay, not a problem. Hopefully you can still get an idea of what colour it actually is. And with that then, let's set it to forwards and see if you can haul these wagons. I don't know how many there are, quite a few. And yes, you can haul them. Okay, let's go and see then whether that's a problem up Gordon's Hill. Alright, let's see. It's looking good. I've got a good feeling about this because it's got a lot of weight to it. And I certainly can't see any wheel slip yet, so that's a great, great sign. And the answer is no, not a problem at all. Absolutely fine. Didn't even see any wheel slip. Obviously that's not a massive train, but again, these are only shunters, so I think that's about all you would want her to be hauling really, and they are quite old and crusty, these wagons, so any modern rolling stock would be absolutely fine with that, I'm sure. Alright, so today's theme is going to be shunters and small industrial locomotives. So to kick that off, we have possibly one of the most famous and well-known shunters of them all, and I'm sure you can guess what it is. It is quite a slow one, so there's a clue, and that's why it's taking so long to come into the shop now. But it is in fact the 08 Shunter, the most famous of them all. Here it is now. And yes, she is hauling some passenger coaches, possibly she's assembling them into a larger train, that's no doubt what she's doing there. But yeah, that's a good loco, not had that one running for a while, so I thought I ought to do that for a change. And then on the inside line, I've got a loco that actually reminds me quite a lot of the Janus Shunters, but just a smaller version. You could probably guess actually what I'm getting at here, but it is in fact the Sentinel made by Hornby, a very lovely model. Here it comes now, and it's got the ICI hoppers on the back. So see which other Shunters you can spot around the layout, and I hope you enjoy the running session. So I think it's always impressive to see such a small loco. I mean, look at that. That loco is about the size of one of those wagons, and yet it's hauling quite a good train of them. Obviously, it is only a small loco in terms of volume. It's very, very heavy. And small niggles aside, at the end of the day, it looks great, doesn't it? It really does look great going around the layout, and you can just imagine how good this would look on a proper industrial shunting layout, perhaps in a more subtle livery than this, but even in this livery, you can imagine it, can't you? Very, very impressive looking thing, and certainly from this sort of viewing distance, the small misgivings, the small grievances are really unnoticeable, I would say. And there's pulling power to spare, which is always very, very good to see. Good old Bachmann 08 shunter there. Also a very powerful loco. That one really is heavy. Really, really heavy, that one. Alright, so here are some of my ratings then for the Oxford Janus. Detail, I've given it 4 out of 5. Overall, the detail is pretty impressive. There are a few small niggles with it, obviously, the lack of sprung buffers, and also at times the lack of finesse. But apart from that, not too bad at all, so definitely above average, 4 out of 5 there. The performance, I'm giving it a 4 out of 5, which I think is a little bit harsh, but I think it's acceptable. The slow speed is really, really good. It's really, really heavy, so it's got great pulling power. It just does tend to cut out a bit on the points, as you've seen, so a little bit of a shame about that. I think it can be fixed. It's not the end of the world, but that's how it was straight out of the box, so that's how I'm going to review it. The quality then is, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. Obviously small performance issues to start with, but that was sorted. Apart from that though, the loco is a little bit flimsy, and also the way it was assembled leaves a little bit to be desired. We've got wonky buffers and glue marks. They do spoil the quality a little bit, but apart from that, it isn't terrible. It certainly isn't too bad, and nothing's broken off since it's arrived with me, so I suppose that's a good thing. The value then, now the prices vary quite a lot. It has an RRP of £99.95, and the cheapest I can see it happens at the moment is about £80. So actually, for £80, I don't think the value is too bad, and as I say, there's a link in the description if you want to pick one up for that. So I've given it 4 out of 5 there. Overall then, that is 7.91 out of 10, not a bad score at all. Into the ranking it goes, there we go, it is in top 2, just second above the Dapol B4 and just below the Oxford N7. So yeah, Oxford at the moment are taking both of the top 2 slots, that's pretty impressive. So actually, to say that generally speaking I'm much more of a steam enthusiast than a diesel one, I have to admit I really do like this, and sometimes even if a model does have 1 or 2 issues, you can't help but enjoy it. There's just something about certain models, and I think actually this is one of them. And there aren't many diesels really that I feel that way about, so yeah, actually I am very, very pleased that I bought this. It's going to be a very welcome addition to the collection, and it'll look great really for any diesel running sessions that I decide to do. Oh, that was a nice little crossover, wasn't it? Well, there you go then, folks. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you liked it. A lot of people have been asking for more diesel reviews and diesel videos, so there's one for you in the bag. Hope you enjoyed that then. That was definitely quite an enjoyable one for me. The Janus is very good. I do quite like it. There are a few issues, so think about them if you're considering buying one. But beyond that, I think overall I can recommend it, especially if you want a good performer. Anyway, folks, that's about it from me. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you very, very soon. Cheers, everybody. See you next time.